Hey there, I'm Jessica Lauren Walton, and this is the Insecurity Podcast. If there's a cool story in the security field or just something that I think is going to be valuable for my fellow professionals, then I want to talk about it. To learn more about the work I do as a writer, you can go ahead and check out my blog at jessicawaltonwriter.com. Today's guest is Rawle Andrews Jr., the executive director of the American Psychiatric Association Foundation. Previous to joining the foundation, he's held various executive leadership roles over the years, including with the American Association of Retired Persons. So we met recently through Colonel Mary Mayhew at the Hero's Journey Symposium in Washington, D.C. He spoke on one of the panels titled Whole Health, and his breadth of knowledge just really blew me away. He's somebody who takes both the bird's eye view and understands the intricacies and the cultures he's working with on the ground. He's amazing, he's dedicated, and it's going to be a great interview today. So I've said enough. Let's get in there and start talking to Rawle. Hi, Rawle. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Jessica.
Yeah, it was such a pleasure to meet you and your colleague Rudy at the recent Hero's Journey Symposium in Washington, D.C. A shout out, of course, to the John P. Mayhew Foundation for organizing the event and their dedication to mental health advocacy over the last decade. So, as the executive director for the APA Foundation, you bring a wealth of knowledge to the table from a variety of fields, including law, nonprofit leadership, public policy. You speak regularly on Capitol Hill to the media and at conferences around the country about improving mental health for our nation. With that in mind, let's kick off this conversation by taking a broad view. What do you consider the most pressing mental health challenges facing the United States today, and how is the APA Foundation addressing these challenges?
So, the short answer to your question is will, capacity, and communications would be the three-legged stool of our problem and our opportunity around mental health and substance use disorders. When we talk about will, what we really are talking about is the fear and shame that keeps somebody or somebody we love from trying to even seek help when we think something might be amiss. When we talk about will, we're also talking about parity. We're still, notwithstanding the laws on the books, that we're supposed to be reimbursing for physical health concerns in the same way we reimburse for mental health concerns. There still is a gap between what mental health clinicians receive in terms of reimbursement versus what physical
Hmm.
health receives. And so people are aware of that. And then we also have this capacity issue. So there is a surge, an overwhelming surge of people who are interested in mental health, who might be interested in treatment, but the workforce shortage makes it impossible or very difficult to get on demand treatment. It's not like you can just walk into an urgent care and think you're going to get exactly the kind of care you need today. We also have an issue around psych beds. So one of the challenges is when you go to a health institution, they got multiple floors, they got multiple specialties, but there's only a small portion of beds per system that is reserved for psychiatric care. So we don't have parity in the beds either. And then there's slots for training, even though we've had an increase in the number of residents who can be psychiatrists. We still don't have enough slots for training psychiatrists for the needs that are emerging and continue to grow. And then finally, communications. The challenge is for every good thing the foundation could do. The misinformation and disinformation is overwhelming. And that is what puts it, really makes our job triply hard because we can put some good facts and information in the hands of the right people, but
Mhm.
it's surrounded by seven-eighths of bad information or misinformation or disinformation that doesn't
Can you give me an
get people.
example? Like
Well,
what's
I
a
mean,
common example of misinformation or disinformation that you see?
I think that people readily think that mental health equals medication. We don't always need or know we need medication, but we certainly need a diagnosis. And it might be that part of your treatment plan does include medication. But on many instances, people just think I can just do self care, right? So what I'm allowed to do is let me go get the best app I can find. And it tells me to power down between 5 a.m. and 10 a.m. But I've been having a really bad day for 6 months, even though I'm powering down, even though I think I'm sleeping better, even though I think I'm eating right. There's something that's not clicking. And if I could get some medical attention and start seeing mental health as a medical issue, just like my knee or my elbow or my shoulder, my heart, wouldn't think twice about going to see a doctor if I thought I had or believed I had a problem with one of those parts of the body. But the one that counts the most, what I'm going to do is just close the blinds and cut off my device, and it's going to go away. It's going to be better tomorrow. And it ends up not being better. And ultimately, sometimes it's worse.
Yeah, so sometimes people question, is this something I can take care of myself or do I need help? And you've mentioned previously that a lot of, mental health cases are people who are in a more advanced stage, need more emergency care. And as you pointed out, we're a little stretched thin regarding resources for emergency care.
So it takes 10 to 15 years from the time of an onset of a mental illness, on average, until somebody actually gets to care. 10 to
Really?
15 years from onset until somebody gets care. What's happening in that decade and a half? 20 years is a generation. So almost, 4/5 of a generation goes by before I've decided, maybe in a teenage lifestyle that I needed some help, but nobody thought, or I don't want anybody to know that I need help because my family's going to have a scarlet letter. And then life continues to go, more problems arise. And then maybe there's again some kind of traumatic event. And now you're at an advanced stage of needing help. And so the therapy, the treatment is going to be a little different because we're catching the condition so much later.
Right. So speaking about the generational aspect, let's take a moment to talk about the youth mental health crisis in the country. So according to APA Foundation statistics, as of 2021, 50% of adolescents have experienced a mental health condition at some point in their lives. And 1 in 5 adolescents have contemplated suicide that we know of, right? Between 2016 to 2020, so this is before the pandemic, the rate of depression among children aged 3 to 17 increased by 27%. So what do you see driving this increasing rate of, I know it includes anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation among the generation today. What is the driver? And if you could speak directly to this generation, what would you say to them?
There's nothing wrong with you. You're going to be fine. But I need to hear from you what you think is really going on, and I'm willing to listen to you. The beauty of this new generation, Jessica, is that they're ready to have this conversation online. They're already having this conversation, but older generations have not been willing or they've been unable to be empathic when it comes to having those conversations. So we have to create a new circle of trust. We have to reimagine what it means that I'm coming to you as candidly and openly as I can to tell you something seems off and I need help, and I need you to not judge what I'm saying. I need you to not judge the way I'm saying it. I just need you to hear me and let's figure out this thing together. When we think about anxiety, when I talk to my doctors, a good rule of thumb for your audience, anxiety typically is baggage, emotional baggage, psychological baggage of something in the future. So I have anxiety because I'm worried about something that might happen or might not happen, but it's in the future, tomorrow and tomorrow's tomorrow. When I think about depression, on the flip side, it typically results from something that happened in the past. And for whatever reason, I can't reconcile. I can't solve for X about what happened in the past. And I'm carrying that weight around. That's the depression. And then when we talk about suicidality, The reality of it is now, post pandemic, the numbers we're seeing is over 2 out of 5 high school students,
Mm.
predominantly young women and girls who have contemplated suicide. But the challenge we have for that same cohort of young men and boys, they tend to use a more violent means to try to hurt themselves. And so, whereas a woman or a young girl might journal or do a digital stylus, and they're writing about their pain, or they're listening to a playlist that we should be listening to in that playlist of what the pain is, but they don't always go through with it because they found an outlet to communicate, even if it's to themselves, that there's a problem. But for the men and the young boys, we're not talking to anybody. We just go out and we decide I'd be better off and everybody around me would be better off if I wasn't around. And if they use the most violent means, unfortunately, we do see death by suicide, or we see a catastrophic outcome, which means now I'm going to need physical help for maybe the rest of my life because I'm in a debilitating state.
Right. So some of these cases, and I don't know if you're aware of what the statistical breakdown is. Some of these cases are clinical cases, right? There is a difference between clinical depression, clinical anxiety, something that's built into your system versus a reaction to things going on outside. Um, so, without even knowing, well, how many cases are clinical versus, a reaction to the environment, we still see an upward trend, right, of reporting. So what is driving that?
So we know that bullying, cyberbullying, is a big driver, particularly for younger
Mm.
folks. We know that what we call dirty cocktails are also drivers. This is the misuse of over-the-counter drugs to try to dull pains and sensitivities. So you just take your favorite beverage, non-alcoholic, and put in something over the counter, and you're just sipping on that all day. A dirty cocktail. That's as dangerous as a gun safety issue in the home. That people's might have the gun locked away, but the over the counter drugs are right there next to the butter knife and the refrigerator, and we're not really monitoring who's going in and going out. I think some of the other things that are happening, plainly, we do have adverse childhood experiences due to housing insecurity, food insecurity, so forth and so on. Those do drive some of these conditions. You have homes where we're asking younger folks to take on adult roles a lot earlier, a lot sooner than maybe they're ready for, and they're feeling the weight of that. And then, I think finally, we can't ignore that we are in a polarizing election season, political season. Even if you're not a advocate of one side or the other, you're not immune to it.
Right.
And
This
we see,
generation is connected to the
yeah,
media.
they're
They're more
connected to the
aware.
media, right? And they
Yeah.
know what's
They're more aware of
happening.
events in general.
And then they tend to be more in a younger generation concerned about the planet. So when
Hmm.
they see things like climate change and the effects of climate change, you don't have to have been in a wildfire or hurricane or a tornado to feel like everything's going wrong all at the same time. And I'm powerless to stop it, and I'm powerless to help it. And so now the world's coming in on me.
Right. So obviously, it's not just one driver. There are many drivers. And it sounds like, right, that exposure through social media, through news media that is unprecedented, right, is also just overwhelming to people. Yeah. And
And go ahead,
mhm.
just
No, I'm glad you brought up adverse childhood experiences. That's just something that's also really relevant to the security community, especially the military. They found, a higher incident of ACE scores, as they call them in the military, after there was a voluntary draft versus a mandatory draft for the country. So I think it's great that you brought that up as well.
well, and one of the things we're trying to do at the foundation, we have a federal grant to do school-based training for all school staff, not teachers, called Notice, Talk, Act at School.
Hmm.
And so it is not only designed to help teachers, it's designed to help coaches, it's designed to help cafeteria workers, custodians, counselors and so forth, anybody who might have an interaction with child at school, how do we notice signs and symptoms of distress? That's the number one thing. I thought I saw something, but I wasn't sure. I'm trying to notice a sign or symptom. Then talk. How do I become a better active listener so that when I see something that seems distressful, I'm able to have an engaging, active conversation about it? And then when we talk about ACT, if I open up this situation, I can't just leave it there. I have to be able to find tools, tips, and resources, including the 988 helpline, that are going to get people what they want to need. Uh, I can give you a story about a year ago. I was youth basketball coach, travel coach, and one of my players, and these guys were all 13, 14, but one of my players was getting teased because he had failed a quiz. And I kept hearing him say, X is suicidal because he had a devastating score on his test. And 15, 20 years ago, Jessica, I probably wouldn't have even done anything. That's just good natured ribbon. That's just boys being boys, sports culture. And because I know Notice Talk Act and I'm an advocate for Notice Talk Act, I had to try to figure out how do I have a conversation with my team and this young individual, because I don't want to be that guy, that coach, 72 hours after some incident where everybody says, how come nobody knew anything? How come nobody saw anything? How come nobody said anything? Did anybody hear anything? And I would be sitting there with my own guilt of like, well, they were teasing each other. I didn't really make much of it. And so what I was able to do was to pull the guy aside out of layup line and like, look, we need to work on your free throws. So come on down here with me. Let them do whatever they're doing. We had a good conversation. It turns out that he wasn't in extreme distress, but he was disappointed in what had happened. And he did not like feeling less than, because everybody in the class, he didn't know what their grades were, but everybody knew his grade. And then, then the question to the team about, what does being a part of a team mean? And a team is holding each other accountable, yes, but it also is lifting each other up when they're most at risk, not beating them down when they need our help the most. And so I think ultimately, Notice Talk Act helped me have that connection with those guys, but then it empowered me in a way that I wouldn't have felt empowered before to go to the parents after practice and say, look, I don't think that there's anything here. I don't know that there's anything here. I don't know what's happening at your house. But this did occur. I did have this conversation. No, I didn't have time to text you in the middle of the moment to say, look, I need to have a conversation with your son about this situation. I'm sorry if you're offended that I felt like I needed to intervene, but I'd rather be sorry about stepping outside my bounds than very
Yeah.
sorry 3 days from now.
Better safe than
Better
sorry,
safe
for
than
sure.
sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, you bring up an important point. Whether you're a teacher or parent, whether you're in the civilian world or the security community, just the power of being able to have a conversation with somebody. I have young kids myself, and I think about the conversations of like, hey, can we put this in perspective? Something that seems devastating to a kid, right? Maybe can have a conversation so they have a wider view of it. It doesn't seem as devastating, or just kind of figuring out a way to help people build their own resilience so
Right.
they have the tools to handle, difficult situations themselves, right? So yeah, just that power of human connection is really important.
And we have to stay connected. It's hard when we're struck in isolation to work through all of these things by ourselves. Even the strongest independent individual, at some point, there is a breaking point for all of us because we're human beings. And I think sometimes, particularly when you talk about the security community, right? We're trying to create superhumans because we're asking them to do hard things in hard places. And there's no time for soft. Just
Yeah.
be hard all the time. Stay hard. And then now we want to unplug all that. It's like when you told me mission team, stay hard. You're telling me, you know, adapt, adjust, overcome. And some of those tools aren't working when I rotate back and I don't have all of the chaos around me where I'm totally comfortable. Now everything is
Yeah.
it's just like dead slow, and I can really reflect. And you and I have talked, briefly about moral injury. Like so, I wasn't thinking about moral injury in the moment, but
Right.
now that I'm here alone by myself, and I can't tell anybody who doesn't understand my community what you
Mm.
don't want to know what I've seen. You don't want to know what I know because you're not ready for it. And you would look at me differently if you understood some of the things that I've seen, some of the things that I know. So, but now I'm removed from my platoon, my brigade, so I don't have a way of really unpacking that stuff, or I think I don't have a way.
Yeah. No, it's a funny thing. I've heard that from several vets. It's like when you're in the moment and you're pumping adrenaline, you're okay. It's when you come down from that, right? And then things are a little more quiet around you and you have to deal, with the aftermath of some of these events for sure. So shifting gears, right, to focus on the security community, uh, veterans, right, often face unique mental health challenges such as PTSD, depression, struggles with transitions back to the civilian sphere. What specific initiatives is the APA Foundation involved in to address the mental health needs of veterans?
So our view has always been, no matter where we're operating, where we live, learn, work, worship, or play,
Hmm.
that our best approach is to be invited to support. And one of the things that we do is we operate again from a three-legged stool. And
Hmm.
so we bring thought leadership, we bring a convening ability that is almost unparalleled, and then we have a micro philanthropy platform. So one of the things we have done is sought out veteran-led organizations. And sometimes these are not VSOs or VFWs. These are true nonprofits who localize and focus on veteran needs. The Veterans Mental Health and Wellness Foundation. You already mentioned the John P. Mayhew Foundation, the Home Base organization out of Boston. All high profile organizations of varying size. And so, what we've tried to do is make sure our doctors, particularly our young trainees, have that kind of exposure. Most of your audience may not know 3 out of every 5 psychiatrists in North America, 60%, has spent some time in the VA system as part of their training or their career. 60%. So they're already equipped, and some of these folks have served or continue to serve. Some of them have not, but they've been through those unique challenges with persons or persons' families who have been in harm's way. And, the big thing we're working on right now is really trying to take our national, almost now international mental health care works campaign. That's mentalhealthcareworks.org. We just eclipsed in
Hmm.
less than 18 months 500 million in audience impressions. And our next frontier is to work with veterans and military families. But because veterans have to help veterans and be willing to work with allies when they're ready, we didn't rush to try to create a testimony or a composite of what a veteran's unique challenges are. And ultimately, what's going to come from that is we're drawing on all the foundations that I talked to you about: Home Base, Mayhew, uh, Veterans Health and Wellness. Give us your vetted resources and let us use our amplification machine to
Hmm.
put that out. The other thing that we think works best, instead of having a vignette or a solo interview with a veteran, we're going to be doing some huddle interviews that will be taped with the permission of the service member or the veteran or their
What's a
family.
huddle interview? I haven't heard that term
So
before.
basically, we're going to take a clinician who and be surrounded by operators or former operators, and they're going to talk about unique challenges and solutions. But the reason why we call it a huddle is because they're sitting around a round table. It's quasi documentary style,
Hmm.
but the answers are not scripted. The questions are generally known, kind of sketched out, but people are ever tell their own truth. And I think the reason why we like the huddle approach is because if you go to our website right now, we do focus on certain conditions. We focus on anxiety. We focus on depression, alcohol addiction. We focus on OCD, and we focus on grief. All of those issues are a part of military life. But there isn't really one person who can represent the entire veteran armed forces and family community. And so we love the huddle approach. One, because there is strength in numbers, but two, because when we beta tested it, one of the things we found, Jessica, was to somebody who serves or has served, self care seems like selfish because that's not about mission and that's not about team. Oh, I can't go today. I got a headache. Well, in civilian life, if you
Yeah.
can't go today, we would tell you if you need a day, take a day, right? Take a sick day, do whatever you got to do. Well, in military life, well, if I don't train, then I'm not going to have enough reps in order to be deployed. And if I don't get deployed, there are good things can come from getting the right duty assignment. But now I've taken myself out of that, and now my team doesn't know if they can count on me when the chips are down. So that has taken some of the operational readiness and morale down, right? But a huddle allows everybody to come together, and these are like operators and veterans. So we're not putting folks in one type of command, mixed matched. Like the best one we saw was Deltas and SEALs. Now, different branches of the American military, but hard people doing hard things in hard places who have a hard time saying they need help.
Right. Well, it's interesting. There was a veteran I was speaking to who said, there's behaviors that are adaptive in one environment, and then they're maladaptive in another environment if you don't know how to transition,
That's right.
right?
Yeah. And Veterans Health and Wellness Foundation and Home Base are doing exemplary work at scale. It's at least in the context of Home Base, nationwide, bringing people to Boston for not only the kind of care and counseling that's needed, but some reentry work as well. And we see in some examples at state level across the United States. But the nice thing about Home Base is they can technically deploy people if you're accepted into the program and you're with them for 2 weeks and they're taking you through a different kind of life cycle
Hmm.
so that when you graduate, it's almost like graduating, from basic, and like you feel like you got a new lease on
Yeah.
life to be re-energized and reinvigorated and readmitted into civilian life.
Right. So you're working within the culture. And it
Right.
and it is important to understand the culture and how to communicate. And like communications is clearly something you take really seriously. I mean, you just mentioned media impressions. And I remember when you were speaking on the panel at the symposium, you also were very aware of the communication strategy, of the reach and the numbers that you have through the APA Foundation. Of course, as a communication strategist, I can appreciate that. And it's just kind of interesting to hear how you're reaching out, to all these groups, right? You're empowering and also communicating through other organizations. You communicate directly through your own organization's platforms. And then it sounds like there's an aspect of word of mouth when you invite, a select group of people to participate, right, in an interview or in a huddle. They can then speak, to their colleagues and bring them towards those resources.
I mean, third party validation in a digital world or an analog world
Social proof.
is social
Yeah.
proof. It's still one of the greatest currencies ever invented, right? I mean, that before the Dixie cup and the string, somebody was, and that's why we're fighting so hard and need help from people like you on the disinformation and misinformation because, yes, 500 million impressions is impressive. There are probably a billion and a half impressions on TikTok that are not all helpful to people, but they're getting recirculated and recycled. I was with some high school students and we were talking about mean memes.
Mm.
Okay. Yeah. And I'm going to give you an example, the Jordan crying meme. This got Michael Jordan at a vulnerable time. And every time somebody has a catastrophe, what social media does is put your face on it or put my face on it, but it's the Jordan me, right? Okay, now, ha 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 ha. But the reality of it is, whether Michael Jordan cares or not, he's a father, he's a husband, he's a grandfather. Do we think about any of his kids or his grandkids when we do that? No. And you're like, well, Raw, sticks and stones. And I'm like, yeah, maybe we had it wrong all along. You know, maybe words can hurt, maybe images can hurt. And the only thing is, because it's invisible injury, see, sticks and stones is visible injury. I can see the scars, I can see the bruises. But invisible injury, and this is particularly true in the security committee, a lot of the injury we're talking about is invisible. If you don't tell us or something doesn't happen, we don't see it. We don't know it. If you got a patch on your eye, we presume there's a reason to have a patch on your eye. Your arm's in a sling. We presume we know your arm's in a sling. We don't know whether that's true or not, but we take you at your word. Your arm's in a sling because it needs to be healed. But trying to heal those invisible wounds, and particularly when you're not willing to speak them out or you don't know how to,
Mhm.
that's why communications is so important.
Right. And even, PTSD, TPI, which it
Sure.
wouldn't be invisible in a scan, right? But to the human eye, it's invisible. And that also makes it more difficult for people to ask for help as opposed to having, a physical wound. Um, so other security professionals, right, such as law enforcement officers and first responders, also face high levels of trauma and stress. How does the APA Foundation view the mental health needs of this group, and what steps are being taken to provide better support for them?
So we see some of the same types of harm that we've seen in the military community, and some of the same ailments, PTSD among them. There are a rise in first responder suicides
Hmm.
or attempted suicides. And one of the things we've done is work with the National Association of Counties and certain sheriff's departments within counties. The best example I can give you is some of the deep dive work we've done with the sheriff of Alexandria City in Virginia. And we have worked hand in glove with a multidisciplinary team to help, you know, uh, first responders see what their needs are, and to really what we're doing, just like when we work with the school staff with Notice Talk Act, we're trying to work with commanders and captains because I'm not going to tell my superior that I'm struggling because I don't want to lose my career. I don't want to get it chained to a desk. I have to be out there helping people, and they don't want to lose that opportunity to help.
Right.
But because we haven't humanized our heroes, it puts them in a position where they don't feel like they can ask for help if they need it. And so, we're working with them. We've brought doctors in, and it's not exactly, it is a different kind of Notice Talk Act because it's more Notice Talk Act in the workplace than it is in the schools. And so you're dealing with different paradigms. A lot of times what we hear from first responders is uh, either they can't turn it off when they go home, or they're not prepared to deal with anything fully at work because there's so much going on at home. And then what everybody does is just say, I hate my job, right? The job may not really be the problem. They may be having a problem they can't express or can't resolve at home. Or the job is a challenge. And when they go back, their family's not prepared because I can't, oh, you never talk. I can't reach you. Like, well, you have no idea what I'm carrying around. And so what I think in working with National Association of Counties and these sheriff's departments has helped do is we get an invitation side door to some of the families. The only challenge we face today, I think, in that work is in many instances, we don't catch the families until it's too late. The family's open now because they've lost a loved one or they got an impaired loved one who was a first responder. And I was in Florida with a group, and this was the sheriff of the county, and he went. I don't want to say he went missing, but he was just not answering his radio. Nobody could find him, and he wasn't the kind of person who didn't. I don't want to say disappear, Jessica, because that makes it seem. But the fact that he was not around for 5 or 6 hours wasn't necessarily a bad thing. But on this particular day, people not being able to reach him no matter what, didn't text back, didn't radio back. And so his uh, widow, who is a former law enforcement officer herself, said, well, he might be down. Sometimes he just goes and fishes, by the lake and, about a mile away. And, that walk helps him coming and going with the day's pressures. And I'm just going to go down to the lake and see if he's there. This is his wife. She finds her husband. I don't think he was non-responsive at the time she found him, but had bled significantly
Hmm.
and ultimately passed away. Um, but if you had asked her the morning of or the day before, had no clue, bless you, had no clue that there was any kind of sign or symptom of
Yeah,
distress. And usually the onset of suicidality, I'm not saying it could never be a one-off. The doctors say there are some absolutely catastrophic things that could be a one-off, but in this instance, it had to be an accumulation of unresolved things over time, and it just got to that point. He had his service revolver. He went down there with it, and nobody was with him in his last minutes before uh, the gun was discharged. But sitting there with her at dinner and then going to her event. I was there for the anniversary of his passing,
yeah,
and the city hall, the county came, the mayor was there. I mean, because beloved. And what we often wonder, Jessica, and I think what I want somebody in your listening audience, your viewing audience, somebody loves you.
yeah.
I know you don't think that. I know you don't know that. I know you haven't heard that. But there is somebody loves you. And if that man, that sheriff, that captain had seen the outpouring of love at his memorial service, I don't know if it would have stopped the inevitable, but it might have slowed it down to where we could get him some help.
Right. And, another important message I'd like to add to that I try to repeat, for the security professional crowd is, sometimes people take their life because they realize, they're having some issues. They might not be able to continue their job, and their job is not just a job. It's their mission, it's their calling, it's become part of their identity. And this fear of losing your job, right? Which, as you pointed out, people hesitate to even ask for help in the first place.
Right?
um, it's so overwhelming that you feel like there's no way out, right? Except to take your life. And my message to those people is like, look, if you are as talented as you are to have gotten as far as you have in the security field, if you need to leave, if it's not the right fit for you anymore, um, you're talented. You'll be able to do something else. You'll find another worthy mission out there that you can connect to that doesn't cause such a strain on your mental health. Absolutely.
Yeah, pain is real, and people need to understand that the body feels what the mind tells it to, and if the mind isn't ready to do that, then it's going to keep working to try to find an answer. And sometimes the answer that's given isn't the answer we would wish somebody would act upon. And,
Right.
and there is no judgment in, death by suicide is a tragedy. But sometimes people feel like there really just is no tomorrow, or that somebody would be better off without me. And I think that somebody that they think would be better off is the person who does love them.
Right. Right. That's the really sad irony about
Yeah.
it. And also it just goes to show you how important early intervention is, training when people, first come into their field. Something people have also been looking into more tools, whether that's police departments, intelligence agencies, or the military, is technology. Also, how can we use tools that we haven't had before? So, how do you see the role of technology such as telemedicine, digital mental health tools in the future of mental health care delivery, particularly for veterans and other security professionals?
It is absolutely needed and essential. And I can tell you proudly that psychiatrists uh, far outpace the other branches of the House of Medicine in using tele tools. And that was starting before the pandemic, but it has even ramped up even more so after the pandemic. That one of the things we've seen is it does shrink the time frame to get care, access to care. The other thing it does is that it takes some of the shame away. I can tell you that as beautiful a building as I think we have in Washington, D.C., I have tried to host events in my convener role, and I've had people to tell me, well, can we just pick another location? Because,
Mm,
nobody wants to be seen coming in and out of a psychiatric building, right? Well, I'm like, it's an office building like every other office building around here, but the logo's on the building. And with Tela, you can do it on your phone, you can do it on your laptop. Nobody has to know. I
mm,
mean, unless you're going to go to a public place to take your appointment, you're on your own, almost like we are, and you're able to do it. The doctors tell me that every day there's new innovations that are coming on the scene. I had the benefit last week of being in Phoenix, Arizona, for a conference called Behavioral Health Tech. And this is the fastest growing, largest behavioral health technology conference in the North America. So you had clinicians there, you had advocates, you had patients, you had venture capitalists, you had payers, uh, ad, public officials, all in this space at the Biltmore Hotel, trying to solve or to show their wares about the newest technology, whether it was digital visors,
mm.
different kinds of apps and wearables and so forth and so on. That's only going to get bigger. And so, even though I think we have to be mindful that, blind technology is not always a great thing either, we do need regulators around
Mm.
how we use technology so it doesn't get misused. The reality of it is treatments that didn't exist 5 years ago are available today. Treatments that didn't exist 20 years ago are available today. So we have to get our head out of the sand because of technology that nobody can help me because there probably is a tool or a device that could be put to use, but you got to get the diagnosis first. And so the other thing we're
Right.
trying to do is ask other doctors in the House of Medicine, Jessica, to be a little more attuned to the emotional, to the psychological. So when you go to the gynecologist, is the gynecologist asking a few questions about your mental condition and not just being, hey, how you feeling? Oh, I'm fine. And then let's get into the regular. When you go to the pediatrician with your children, are they asking a few more probing questions than just the usual run of the mill? How's everything going? And then people tell, oh, I'm okay. And then you just kind of get into the regular, right? So we want to go into the probe. I mean, I talked to a cardiologist and we were talking about hearts and minds. And we think we're going to launch in the new year a hearts and minds series.
Mm.
And he said, imagine a cardiac patient who has to have a valve replaced or major heart surgery. So I tell them on Thursday that you have a chronic heart condition, you need surgery. We're going to do the procedure next week. And your life's never going to be the same, but there's an 80% chance the surgery will be fine.
What a
Guess what?
shock.
Guess what happens, Jessica? I have to sit with that surgery for a week. There's nothing physical that's happening from this Thursday to next Thursday other than me knowing I got surgery next week. They're going to crack my chest open. And I'm probably going to be okay, but I'm never going to be able to do all the things that got me to this place. All emotional, all psychological. So we're asking doctors. There's a model that we call the collaborative care model. And
Hmm.
it tries to treat the whole person because we want the whole person to be whole and well, or as whole and as well as you can be. That's physical and mental.
Mm. Right. That's really interesting, making it, more comprehensive in physical care, that mental and physical care is not two separate things, but they're married together. If you recall Susan Reineck, who we also met at the symposium, right? She's I believe a speech pathologist, speech specialist, and she's been involved in a lot of rehabilitative care over the years for the elderly population. And, I wound up speaking to her after the conference, and she was saying how important it is, when you're, training people or trying to physically rehabilitate them to address the fact that, they're probably a little depressed about their situation. And, how can we kind of get them to be a little more upbeat or humorous, because that's going to help them with their physical rehabilitation as well.
And we know it will help. But I think, part of what really helps, and I think this is where the security community, if veterans are seen helping veterans,
Mm,
because I got help, not saying my solution is necessarily your solution, but we've been in some things together and we know each other. That kind of teamwork helped in a forward area that's way more dangerous than the area we're in right now. How come it worked there, but it couldn't work here? And I think the what we hope that our campaign will do, and it won't be an all vets only campaign, but that component of our campaign that talks to veterans, military families, and first responders, that they will see if Jessica could get help. And I think the world of Jessica. Maybe I should give it a try. If Raw could go talk to somebody, I don't think I need to do it. But if he could do it, and he still seems like he's the same guy after he went to talk to somebody, maybe I can just go talk to somebody. And I don't think I need as much help as Raw needs, but everything's not fine and well every day. Let me just have a conversation and let's see what happens.
right.
It could get better. It's unlikely to get much worse.
All right. So yeah, I mean, part of tackling the stigma, as you're pointing out, is tackling the taboo around it. And when you see somebody that you respect, kind of, shoving that taboo to the side, it's
Right.
encouraging, right? It encourages others to do so as well. So looking toward the future, how can organizations better support mental health awareness and reduce stigma within the security profession?
So I think we've got to be more enlightened, informed, and sensitive to the unique needs of those in veterans community. And I don't think it's uh, passive to say that we ask a lot of the less than 1% of persons in the United States who serve or have served to do a lot. We don't know them all, we owe them all. And if we really do owe them all, we have to do more. We have to be willing to reach out. And we need to find who are their trusted voices. I had an opportunity to meet uh, General Greg Martin earlier
Oh,
this year, the
I
bipolar.
interviewed him as well.
Okay,
Yes.
see,
Yes,
so
he's great.
so
He's out there.
the bipolar general. I'm not saying he's the
Oh yeah.
sole solution, right? But if people would
Yeah.
listen to General Martin's story,
Hmm.
and he will tell you, as I'm sure he told you in your interview, he was probably in high school at the onset.
Yeah.
But the reality of it is, he was Rambo
Yeah.
because when he was in country, all of the things that drove his illness worked in the field. It was only when he got deployed home and had to sit at a desk that things seemed to be spiraling out of control.
Uh,
And then took a really catastrophic meeting for him to know that he was going to have to get the help he needed. But the fact that he was willing to put that in the book. Now, I'm not saying people are going to go buy the book. I'm not. I don't have any financial interest in his book. But even if you got the audiobook, to just listen to his story, a highly decorated Army officer who would be willing to say, if anybody would listen, I've done it all. I've seen it all. And even I couldn't work through this without help.
right. Right. And he's willing to talk about all the difficult things. I asked him, well, do you know where the mental illness starts and ends versus your personality? And he said, no. That's an
Exactly.
uncomfortable topic for a lot of people. Or, what was it like? What was the social impact, right? When you started to have, more severe symptoms that people notice? That's an uncomfortable question, but he doesn't shy away from any of
No,
that. And he's considered, you know, in a way, an influencer because he's
he's
somebody
an
who's speaking
influencer.
publicly about it.
He
Yeah.
is. I mean, I probably spent about 45 minutes with him. That even though we were at a conference, we probably spent about 45 minutes together over 3 days. And I can't tell you how many times he told me, when you guys are ready, just give me a call. He's like, you don't
Yeah.
have to rush. I'm going to be here. But when you guys are ready, because most of the folks you're going to be dealing with uh, are not generals. So
Yeah.
if a general is saying it, then we might want to listen. But, at the same time, I think the other thing we have to do to that very point, I've talked to some enlisted and former enlisted members, and their unique challenges are a little different sometimes than an officer's challenge. And I did actually have an enlisted person ask me once, was our campaign only about military officers and retired military officers? And I
Hmm.
said, well, no, but they see me with Mayhew, and they see me with Lewis, and they see me with Page, and these are, they see me with Cummings, Martin. These are generals and colonels. And so, you know, for a master sergeant, what about me?
Interesting.
What about my family? And so I think even we had a blind spot. We thought we were getting to influencers, and we were turning off some of the people we wanted to help because they're like, well, yeah, but this is an officer's campaign. You're not trying to work with non-commissioned folks. And we were like, no, 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 no. We thought we go to the leaders of leaders, and that would open the way. And they're like, well, but there's a lot of ways to be a leader. So I
Right.
think even when we think we're doing it right, we could still have a blind spot. So what we can do is it's all service members, it's all veterans, it's all of their family members. Don't just think you isolate. We hear this with unique challenges for athletes. I was with Meta World Peace in the summer in Los Angeles, and he was saying, nobody cares about my family, but I can get all the help I need. Right. So what about my family, my brothers, sisters, cousins, mother? They don't have my resources. They don't have my exposure. Who's looking out for them? So I think we have to take care of the whole village when we try to help, not just be isolated on one. Yes, the story of one can help millions, but we have to be aware that one, there's hundreds of thousands underneath who are crying silently for help, and we just haven't reached them.
Well, I think it's great that people were willing to give you feedback, that you were willing to take that in and adjust your tactics. And yeah, I think that's a really good point that it's definitely helpful to have people in a place of leadership speaking out, but it's not enough because people who aren't in a place of leadership might feel like, well, yeah, but it's not quite relevant to me. So I think that's an interesting realization that you need to have spokespeople of, you know, different places in their different levels in their career, maybe different, religious backgrounds, different
Right?
ethnicities, right, for
Yes.
minorities. So people,
Yes.
feel like, okay, that is somebody I can relate to. And, we've talked a lot today about that importance of social proof.
Spot on. What don't
Awesome.
you know? Jessica knows all.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, Raul, thank you so much for joining me today. It was really great to reconnect with you, and thank you to Rudy for making it happen. And I wish you a lot of success with your work at the APA Foundation.
Jessica, we can't thank you enough for this opportunity. And I just leave you and your audience with this. No one person or organization can solve a big problem alone. But as soon as you realize we can't do everything, you can quickly realize together we can do anything.